Hello human, welcome to the 12th installment of our series, 30 incredible and true facts, plus one fake. An educational entertainment game in which you must discover which fact is the false one. The false fact was... Number 16. Here's a reminder. Would you give up a kidney for the latest iPhone?
No. Well, yes.
In September 2022, the Dr. Neith Beauty Center Clinic in Laos launched a proposal that shocked the world. Faced with a critical shortage of organ donors in the country, the medical center began offering the newest Apple model in exchange for a kidney. The story went viral after a photo surfaced of young people showing their scars alongside their new phones. The Red Cross immediately intervened, calling the offer immoral and illegal, and warning that this kind of campaign encourages dangerous organ trafficking. What started as a search for donors turned into a criminal investigation. Fake. Although the photo of the young people with scars went viral in 2022, it was not a real offer. It was an advertising campaign by a clinic in Laos meant to joke about how expensive the iPhone is. The prank was so confusing that the Red Cross had to step in to clarify that no such exchange existed and to warn about the dangers of these messages. It was simply a marketing stunt that got out of control. Let's move on to the facts of this episode. Let's go. In Bali and India, monkeys operate a hostage economy. They steal phones or glasses and hold them until tourists pay a ransom in food. A scientific study showed that they can even distinguish which objects are more valuable, demanding better rewards for an iPhone than for a pair of glasses. The level of vandalism is real. In 2016, a monkey in Bombay was captured and arrested after 6 months of stealing from markets and harassing neighbors. This offender was displayed in a cage before being sent to a rescue center for his crimes. In 2016, Donald Pugh became the most vain fugitive in history. When he saw that Ohio police had published his wanted photo, he was furious, but not for the reason you'd expect. He didn't care about being on the run. He hated his mugshot. Outraged, he sent them a selfie wearing a suit and sunglasses, saying, "Here's a better one, that one is terrible." His wish came true. The police posted the new photo. It went so viral that he was recognized, and he ended up being arrested in Florida due to sheer egocentrism. A man in the United States sued the company High Life Products over a workplace accident that occurred in 1977. But the curious part isn't the lawsuit itself. What's truly absurd is that the owner of the company was none other than Peter Maxwell himself. So technically, he sued himself.
What?
And the most incredible part is that after years of legal battle, he won the case in 1990, forcing his own insurance to pay him compensation in a trial where he was the sole protagonist. In Milan, Italy, there is a 19th century law that technically requires you to smile in public under threat of a fine. This regulation only allows you to be serious at funerals or in hospitals. And although it sounds like a joke, it's still on the books because it was never formally repealed. However, today it's just a dead law, forgotten on paper, so obviously no one is arrested or fined for not smiling anymore. But the rule remains as an absurd trace of a time when happiness was attempted to be imposed by decree.
Okay, everybody, let's see some big smiles. Just relax, let the hooks do their work.
What the hell are you smiling at?
There's a saying that to win, sometimes you have to leave your soul on the track. And Frank Hayes is the perfect example of that. In 1923, he took part in the race of his life in New York, but suffered a sudden heart attack just before reaching the finish line. Incredibly, his body remained in the saddle, and his horse, Sweet Kiss, went on to win the race. Because of this, Hayes holds an official Guinness World Record as the only jockey in history to have won his first and only race after dying. Disney has set a milestone in inclusion with its project Songs in Sign Language. Instead of using an external interpreter, the studio chose to reanimate scenes from scratch from films like Encanto and Frozen 2 so that the characters themselves sing in sign language. Working alongside deaf actors, the animators ensured that every hand movement and facial expression is fully authentic. It's the first time a major studio has redesigned its classic animations so that the deaf community can experience music through the eyes of their favorite heroes. On December 12th, 2025, in Miami, Florida, a young girl named Sofia Martinez became separated from her father in the crowd at a Christmas festival. Since she didn't have a recent photo, the local police asked her to draw him. She produced a portrait with very exaggerated features, huge eyes, and a rather comical expression. What seemed like a useless drawing became astonishing when officers located a man who looked exactly like the girl's crayon sketch. The resemblance was so precise that the reunion video racked up millions of views as the most accurate portrait in history. In 1994, Aeroflot Flight 593 crashed in Siberia, and at first everything pointed to a storm or a technical failure. But the truth was far more absurd. The captain, Yaroslav Kudrinsky, allowed his 15-year-old son to take the controls mid-flight. Without realizing it, the teenager partially disengaged the autopilot, causing a nearly imperceptible deviation during critical seconds. When the pilots tried to correct it, it was already too late. The aircraft's tilt and gravitational forces made it impossible to regain control. All 75 people on board died due to a negligence as absurd as it was avoidable inside the cockpit. A 34-year-old man in Vietnam arrived at the emergency room with such intense abdominal pain that doctors initially thought it was a simple infection. However, when they performed an X-ray, what they discovered was astonishing. Inside his abdomen was a 30-centimeter live eel.
¿Cómo? ¿Nani?
The animal had been inserted through the rectum as part of an extreme sexual practice. And in its attempt to escape, it perforated the intestine, causing a life-threatening infection. In the end, surgeons intervened immediately to remove the animal, preventing the patient from having to explain to his insurance how a 30-centimeter eel ended up living in his abdomen.
Ajuda ele, Luciano. Ajuda o cara aí, Luciano.
In late 2024, Tesla went viral for its Tesla Vision system, a set of AI-powered cameras that analyze the surroundings to improve driving. However, it wasn't its efficiency that caught people's attention, but user reports claiming that when passing by cemeteries, they saw figures on the screen that looked like people among the graves. Although the company insists they aren't ghosts, the system is so cautious that it sometimes interprets objects like headstones as people to avoid risks. Even so, many believe that by operating with infrared light and other frequencies, these sensors might be detecting something the human eye simply cannot see. Do you think having hiccups for 10 minutes is bad? Now imagine having them for more than 6 decades.
Tonight on Eye on Springfield, we meet a man who's been hiccuping for 45 years.
Kill me. Kill me. Kill me.
In 1922, Charles Osborne started hiccuping after a fall and didn't stop for 68 years. He hiccuped more than 430 million times until the hiccups disappeared inexplicably in 1990. He only got to enjoy 1 year of peace before his death in 1991, leaving behind a world record that medicine was never able to explain. In the 1920s, there was a group of women known as the Radium Girls, who literally glowed in the dark. This was because they painted watch dials with a luminous paint. But what they didn't know was that the glow came from radium, a highly radioactive material that clung to their skin, hair, and clothes, contaminating them little by little. Their bosses even encouraged them to lick the brushes to keep them sharp, causing them to ingest the poison directly. Over time, the radiation destroyed their bodies from the inside, rotting their bones and disfiguring their faces. The level of contamination was so extreme that even today, their remains are still dangerously radioactive. If you're a suspicious person who values your privacy, this sweater is your solution. It may look like a regular piece of clothing with a pretty ugly pattern, but it has the power to make you invisible to AI-powered human recognition systems. Developed by researchers at the University of Maryland together with Facebook, its chaotic design creates visual noise that confuses the algorithms. To people, you look completely normal, but to cameras, it's as if you're not even there, a true digital ghost. In Poland, there's a viral event called 4th of July LARP, where hundreds of people transform a resort to live as if they were in a town in Ohio. It's not just a party, it's a role-playing experience where they act out everything from barbecues to economic crises to explore the contradictions of the American dream. They do it out of a mix of fascination with Hollywood cinema and social critique, and in July 2026, they will launch a new edition of this strange fictional US right on Polish soil. Lina Marcela Medina holds the Guinness World Record as the youngest mother in history after giving birth in Peru at the age of 5 years and 7 months. In 1939, what her family believed to be a tumor turned out to be a pregnancy caused by precocious puberty. Her son was born healthy via cesarean section, although the identity of the father was never established. This real clinical case remains one of the most well-documented medical events in history. In Singapore, failing to flush a public toilet is illegal and can be punished with fines of up to $1,000. This rule, regulated under the Environmental Public Health Act, is enforced through random inspections to maintain national hygiene. It's one of the many strict laws that have given the country its reputation for order and absolute cleanliness. In 1976, the world stood on the brink of nuclear war. The United States mobilized B-52 bombers, aircraft carriers, and elite troops toward Korea. And you might think it was over oil or geopolitical strategy, but no, it was over a tree. It all began when US and UN soldiers tried to prune a poplar tree that was blocking the view, and North Koreans responded with a deadly attack. The reaction was Operation Paul Bunyan, such an absurd show of force that they deployed an entire army just to protect the engineers who cut down the tree in 42 minutes. In the end, the world avoided a global war because they decided to quite literally cut the problem at its root. In 1983, In the Fog was published, a book that vividly detailed the murder and cannibalism of a student in Paris. Many believed it was fiction, but the author, Issei Sagawa, wrote it based on the crime he himself committed, and for which he was never truly punished due to a series of absurd legal circumstances. He was declared insane in France and extradited to Japan, where he was deemed sane and released due to lack of charges. Sagawa took advantage of this impunity to profit from his own monstrosity, turning his atrocity into a bestseller without serving a single day in prison. He died a free man on November 24, 2022. In June 2024, in China, workers demolishing Miss Qin's house got the scare of their lives. Among the rubble, they found a live grenade. But the surprise didn't end there. The 90-year-old woman admitted it was her favorite tool and that she had used it as a hammer to drive nails and crush peppers for more than 20 years. In the end, authorities carried out a controlled detonation of the object, confirming it was extremely dangerous and that the fact it hadn't exploded after decades of rough use was almost miraculous. Do you think your friend eats weird things just because he enjoys liver and onions?
Want to go celebrate? I feel like liver and onions.
Well, wait until you hear about Michel Lotito, the man who turned metal into his daily diet. Known as Monsieur Mange-Tout, this Frenchman became famous for consuming objects that would kill anyone else, from televisions and shopping carts to an entire Cessna 150 airplane, a feat that took him 2 years of meals. Thanks to a stomach lining twice as thick as normal, he digested more than 9 tons of metal throughout his life. Curiously, Lotito claimed that the only thing that upset his stomach was soft food, like eggs or bananas. In India, there are holy men known as Urdhvamukhi, who practice an extreme lifestyle of sacrifice. Their most astonishing test consists of raising one arm to the sky and vowing never to lower it. The most famous case is Amar Bharati, who has maintained this posture since 1973. After decades, his arm atrophied and calcified until it became fixed in a vertical position. For them, that rigid limb is proof that their faith is more powerful than pain. There's a saying, when people get bored, they start doing stupid things. Larry Walters, tired of his routine as a truck driver, decided to take that saying to the extreme on July 2nd, 1982. He tied 45 weather balloons to a lawn chair, sat down, and took off. With no plan, he reached nearly 5,000 meters, surprising pilots over Los Angeles. To come back down, he started shooting the balloons with a BB gun until he ended up tangled in power lines, causing a blackout. Even so, he survived. But not the arrest or a $1,500 fine. When the press asked him why he did it, he replied, "A man can't just sit around." Ironically, his chair ended up on display at the Smithsonian Museum. Imagine playing a bloodthirsty gunslinger on camera and ending up becoming one in real life because of an absurd mistake on set. That's what Alec Baldwin experienced in 2021 during the filming of Rust, when, in the middle of a rehearsal, he fired a revolver that was supposed to be a prop, accidentally discharging a real bullet. The accident took the life of cinematographer Halyna Hutchins, turning a movie scene into a real tragedy that shocked the world. During World War II, agent Phyllis Latour sent 135 strategic messages from occupied France without being detected. Unlike other spies, she didn't rely on carrier pigeons or complex Morse code. Her method was far more ingenious and everyday. Phyllis hid silk codes with dot patterns directly within her knitting. Despite frequent searches by soldiers, they never suspected that vital information was woven into her scarves and socks, allowing her to transmit crucial data to the resistance. Does consent have a limit, or do we own our lives even to the point of deciding who gets to devour us? In 2001, Armin Meiwes posted an online ad looking for someone to be slaughtered and consumed. Against all logic, an engineer named Bernd Brandes responded voluntarily. The two met at a mansion in Germany to record what would become a real-life nightmare, a consensual act of cannibalism that lasted for hours. Meiwes was captured months later, sparking an unprecedented legal debate. Is it murder if the victim consented in writing? In the end, the cannibal of Rothenburg was sentenced to life in prison, making it clear that not even mutual consent can justify such horror. According to US law, a life sentence requires the convicted person to remain in prison until death, something Benjamin Schreiber learned the hard way. In 2015, this Iowa inmate was clinically dead after an infection caused his heart to stop, but he was revived. When he woke up, he demanded his release, arguing that since he had died, his life sentence had already been fulfilled. The court rejected his argument, ruling that the sentence only ends with permanent death. Schreiber returned to his cell and continued serving his sentence until he actually passed away in 2023. Can you imagine literally turning into a tree?
Oh, Dios, agua y sol.
Abul Bashandar suffers from epidermodysplasia verruciformis, an incurable genetic condition that causes his skin to produce keratin growths resembling tree branches. His limbs reached a weight of up to 5 kilograms, preventing him from taking care of himself. Although he underwent more than 25 surgeries, these branches keep growing back relentlessly. His case is one of only about 500 ever reported in history, making it one of the strangest medical mysteries in the world. On February 20th, 2014, Neelam Sharma, the wife of the editor of the Swarajya Times, was murdered in her home. The crime seemed perfect, and the police were clueless until the only silent witness decided to speak. Hercules, the family's parrot. The bird, which had fallen silent after the attack, would go into a state of absolute fury every time the victim's nephew, Ashu, came near. Noticing this, the widower began reading out different names in front of it, and when he said Ashu, the parrot erupted into screams. "He killed! He killed!" That reaction became the key piece of evidence that broke the suspect, leading him to confess and eventually be sentenced to life in prison in 2023. In the end, the killer forgot the most dangerous detail. Walls don't talk, but parrots do. In 1986, the Cleveland Balloon Fest attempted to break a world record by releasing millions of balloons for charity, but the sky turned into a nightmare. A storm pushed the mass of latex back down toward the ground and Lake Erie, blocking airports and causing car accidents. The worst part was that the Coast Guard couldn't rescue 2 stranded fishermen because it was impossible to spot them among so many floating balloons. Both men died, and the event ended in multi-million-dollar lawsuits and a historic ecological disaster. Can you imagine discovering how to save millions of lives and ending up locked away because of it? Ignaz Semmelweis discovered in 1847 that the key to stopping the deadly postpartum fever was simply for doctors to disinfect their hands. Instead of praising him, his colleagues felt insulted and dismissed him as insane, pushing him into a mental breakdown that ultimately led to his confinement in an asylum. There, he was beaten by guards and, ironically, died from a blood infection, the very illness he had been trying to prevent. You finally went out with the girl you like, and when the moment came, your little buddy didn't work. Well, this creature might be your solution. The Brazilian wandering spider, an animal whose venom has a very particular side effect. It can cause an erection lasting more than 4 hours. But don't worry, you don't have to let it bite you. Scientists have already created a gel based on its toxin that promises the same effect, without the venom or the pain. In this way, medicine turned a deadly bite into the next great ally of your sex life. And that's all for now. Now it's your turn. Which one is the fake fact? Give it a shot and try to guess. If you enjoyed the series, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. Your support means a lot. Until the next installment, peace.